not a huge amount of time, but it will take a little bit longer. It will perform a detailed scan of errors to try and find any errors in your Windows installation. Next up comes the Restore Health switch, and this works similarly to the System File Checker. It will try to restore files automatically from its backup or to download them from Windows Update. Now occasionally you may find that even this doesn't work, so what you need is to download a Windows image from the Microsoft website. Now you can either download an image from this link here, Software Download Windows 11, which will download the very latest image, or if you're using a different feature pack or a different version of Windows 11 on that PC, you'll need to download the correct Windows image from your volume licensing portal. So what you need to do with the image downloaded is you need to mount it. So in File Explorer, you right click on it, you select Mount, and make sure that it's got a drive letter, because you'll need that drive letter. So there's two commands we can then use. The first, here we're using Restore Health as we've done before, but now we're specifying a source for it to use. Now this I put on the D drive, but your mounted image might be on the E drive, the F drive, and so on. And within that image you've got a source folder, and then you've got an install.wim disk image, which is the main core of the Windows operating system. And this might fix the problem. Sometimes, occasionally though, Windows Update still kind of gets in the way and causes issues. So if you want to make sure that Windows Update isn't used at all in this process, if you use the Limit Access switch, then Windows Update won't be allowed to interfere in the process. So how do we use the Deployment Image Servicing Management tool to repair problems with a corrupt installation of Windows? So let's have a look in a practical context of how we do this. We run DISM from the command prompt. You don't need to enter a specialist environment, and you need to run it as an administrator and click through the user account control that you see. So we're going to do a couple of checks for errors. So we'll just type dism/on/cleanup-image/check health. And this will do a super speedy check, and you might think, well, it's a little bit too quick. So we want to do a proper full check. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the same command, but rather than check health, we're going to use scan health. And this will do a full, in-depth, detailed scan of the Windows installation and report back. And it takes about 3 or 4 minutes to do, so we'll come back to it when it's done. So here we are at the end of the process, and if it finds any component store corruption, as it says here, then it will detail that for you. It hasn't found any on this occasion, but this is how the tool is used to scan for errors in Windows 11. Now, as you probably know, Windows keeps a backup copy of itself called the refresh or reset image, and this can be used to restore the operating system if it's completely corrupt, but it can also be used to repair the operating system. This command here, this DISM command, online cleanup image restore health, will do that, and it'll use both that backup image and also Windows Update to try and repair problems with the operating system by replacing any corrupt component on the PC with either the correct component that's backed up or one that's downloaded from Microsoft's servers in the cloud. And hopefully at the end of this process you will find that your PC has been repaired, provided of course that the backup image itself isn't corrupt, and then you've got a bigger problem, but we'll look at that in a minute. If that doesn't work for you, then you'll need a Windows installation ISO file, and I'll look at where you can get these in a minute. Now, you need to mount the file when you've got it. You can do this either by right-clicking on it in File Explorer or clicking the Mount button that you will see in File Explorer. And when it's mounted, we'll open it and I'll show you the source of the Windows installer file that you will need. So here we are inside the Windows 11 ISO installation file, and you'll see there's a sources folder. So we'll open this folder, and then when we scroll down the list of files, you'll see a file here called install.wim. Wim is Windows image. And you'll see it's substantial, it's almost 6 gigabytes in size. And this is the file that we need to use to repair our Windows installation. So when you download an up-to-date or a relevant copy of Windows 11, an ISO file, because the one you download has got to match the version that's installed on a PC, and in business and enterprise that's not always the latest version. So we'll start with consumers, however, and if you go to the Microsoft website here, /software-download/Windows 11, we can see here that we can download a disk image ISO. So we select Windows 11 here, we click download, and then we're asked which language we want. So we'll say English United States, click confirm, and our download will be available for us. You'll see here 64-bit download. Now, as I say, there is an issue here that if you don't have the latest version of Windows 11 installed on the PC, you will only get the latest version to download. So this could be a challenge, and then you might have to find yourself having to reset the PC or maybe even reinstall it from scratch. If you're in business, then you've got a couple of different options. You're either going to have access to the Microsoft licensing portal here and software assurance, where you can download not just the latest version of Windows 11, but also older versions of Windows 11 as well, all as ISO installation files. If you have access to the My Visual Studio website, then we can search for Windows 11 here, and you can see there's lots of different versions of Windows 11, business and consumer, dated for different years even, that you can download the ISO installation file for. Lastly, if you're running an insider build of Windows 11, then we can sign into the Windows Insider website, and when we scroll down, we'll see at the bottom we've got a select edition, and you can choose the edition that you want to download as an ISO file. When the time comes to repair your Windows installation using your downloaded and mounted ISO file, we need to know what its drive letter is. And we can see here in the This PC view in File Explorer that it's listed as D, but if drive letters are hidden, you can go into its properties and you can get information about it there. So here it says drive D. So we go back into the command prompt, running it as an administrator, and you use this command here, dism/online/cleanup-image/restore health, and then we detail the source. So we've got the D drive, the sources folder, and the install.wim file name. Additionally, there's another switch here, limit access, and if you use this switch, then it will prevent the installer from trying to get any files from Windows Update, and it will only use the files that are on that ISO installation file itself. when the time comes to
Hi everyone, welcome to the Mitigate Threats using Microsoft Sentinel course. This certification prep course will help you prepare for the SC200 Microsoft Security Op.
Hello everyone, my name is Brian Alderman and I want to welcome you to my course, Managing Security Using Microsoft Defender XDR. I'm a former 6-year MVP, 28-year MCT, and 7-year PMP, and I have over 30 years of training and consulting, as well as an international speaker at over 150 conferences and counting. I'm an author of 4 Microsoft technology books and the CEO of my own company, MicroTechPoint. Microsoft 365 currently has over 345 million paid subscribers, so it's a popular platform that requires careful planning and deployment to assure your Microsoft 365 resources are protected. In this course, we're going to introduce and discuss managing security and threats using Microsoft Defender XDR, implementing and managing collaboration and email protection, and implementing and managing endpoint protection. By the end of this course, you'll know what needs to be carefully considered when monitoring and responding to security threats, as well as implementing and managing email, collaboration, and endpoint protection in Microsoft 365, which are all used to protect your resources. However, before beginning this course, you should be familiar with your organization's security policies and have a general understanding of cloud-based services. Well, I hope you'll join me on this journey to learn about Microsoft 365 Security Administration with my Managing Security Using Microsoft Defender course, available here at Pluralsight. Hello and welcome to Pluralsight. My name is Brian Alderman and I'm going to be spending some time with you as we walk through this journey on Microsoft 365 administration. In this course, Managing Security Using Microsoft Defender XDR, we have 3 primary topics that we're going to be discussing. Managing security reports and threats using the Microsoft Defender portal, implementing and managing email and collaboration protection, as well as implementing and managing endpoint protection. We're going to begin in this first module by taking a look at an introduction to Microsoft Defender XDR. We'll talk about what is provided with Microsoft Defender XDR. We'll then introduce and explore the Secure Score. We'll talk about reviewing and responding to security incidents and alerts, as well as security and compliance report issues, and lastly, threats detected in threat analytics. And I want to begin by introducing Microsoft Defender XDR. It's a unified pre- and post-breach defense suite that coordinates detection, prevention, investigation, and response across endpoints, identities, emails, and applications to provide protection against these attacks. And if you're wondering what XDR is, it's the Extended Detection and Response. And the Microsoft Defender XDR includes several products and solutions. It includes Defender for Endpoint, as well as Defender for Office 365, both of which we'll be talking about more in detail in this module. It also includes Defender for Identity, Defender for Cloud Apps, the Defender Vulnerability Management Dashboard, which we'll be talking about, the Microsoft Enter ID Protection. It includes Microsoft Data Loss Prevention, so DLP policies, and it also includes App Governance. I want to begin by introducing Defender XDR's unique cross-product layer components. XDR is used to help protect against attacks and coordinate defensive responses across services. It also is used for reporting details of attacks across product alerts, behaviors, and the context for security teams. It helps automate responses to attacks by triggering self-healing measures on the impacted assets, and it also provides the capability to enable security teams to complete effective threat tracking across endpoint and Office data. And the Defender portal provides several different features. It provides a cross-product single pane within the Defender portal. We'll see this later on, by the way. Combined incidents queue, an automatic response to threats, some of the common threats, self-healing of compromised devices, identities, and mailboxes. We can actually create triggers to respond to these common threats. and it also provides cross-product threat tracking. Now, in order for us to use Microsoft Defender, there are some requirements we need to meet. We have to have the appropriate security license, an E3 with security add-on, or an E5, or the Defender for Office 365 Plan 2, not Plan 1, but Plan 2, or an M365 Business Premium subscription. In addition to that, we have to have the appropriate permissions to enable XDR. This requires Global Administrator or Security Administrator permissions, and these are used to enable XDR. Now, for us to manage XDR, again, we can come back to the Global Administrator and the Security Administrator, but also we have the Security Operator. For read access, we have Global Reader and we have Security Reader. And to access this, we can use any HTML5 compliant browser, and we can use Edge as well as IE11. And one of the key aspects of the Defender portal is what's called the Secure Score, which is a measurement of an organization's security posture with a higher score, meaning a lower identified risk level. And there are some considerations associated with this Secure Score. The Secure Score contains 4 different categories: identity, app, device, and data. The security score is used to help report on organization's security posture, improve that security posture by providing data, and it also is used to compare with benchmarks and establish KPIs, your key performance indicators. And the Secure Score is points driven, and you get points for following recommended actions that are provided by Microsoft. We receive points for configuring recommended security features, for performing security related tasks, as well as mitigating recommended actions. Well, I want to take a couple minutes and step out to our tenant and take a look at the interface that's available when using Microsoft Defender XDR. And you'll see here, I'm going to start with the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I just opened up the portal. I'm going to click on the Show All to open up all the different admin centers, and we're going to go right into the Security Admin Center. And once we get inside of here, you're going to see that we have some options available on the left-hand side. Now, this navigation menu on the left-hand side is dynamic. As I add additional add-ons, like I've already added in, for instance, the endpoint option down here. Here's the endpoints. I can close that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So this may look different for you when you first come in here. But we have our home page, and here we have deployment health. We have connection of SaaS apps. Here is our Secure Score. Device compliance, no managed devices, 0 users at risk. Insider risk management. Device health, device at risk. Simulation, active incidents. Discover devices to onboard. Devices discovered in the last 7 days. So just a plethora of information on just the landing page. Then you go to the navigation on the left-hand side, and you have a ton more options that we can work with when we're managing security through the Microsoft Defender interface. Well, let's jump over to the Secure Score interface. And you're going to see here we have 4 tabs across the top. But let's glance down here at the Secure Score, 50.98%. Remember, I built this tenant pretty recently to have a clean tenant for the courses available with this exam. This is the Microsoft Secure Score. Has an identity, data, apps, actions to review, top recommended actions. Remember, as we go in and address these, our score will go up. So if we go in and move messages that are detected as impersonated users by mailbox intelligence, well, if we address that, then our score will increase by 2.84%. If we go down here and enable impersonated user protection, 2.84% if we implement these. So this is where we can come in and take a look at improving our score, and we're kind of handheld going through that. And so I'll click on recommended actions, and you'll see the items that we just talked about. Move messages that are detected as impersonated users, set phishing email level threshold at 2 or higher, enable impersonated user protection, plethora of options as we go through here. And all we need to do is address these to increase that score. And if we go to history, we'll see that we are down 31.83%. And you'll see at one point we were around 80%, and now we're down to around 50-ish%. We can scroll down here and see some of the activities that have taken place that have affected the change in this score. And we also have a tab over here for our metrics and trends. And again, here's our Secure Score, add score zones. Here's our decrease, regression trend, risk acceptance trend. So we have some options and some charts to look at to help us manage our secure score. And the big thing for you to do is hit this recommended actions and take actions on these suggestions here. So I just want to take a couple minutes to introduce you to the Microsoft Defender XDR portal and some of the options that you have available to you to manage your security in your tenant. Our next topic of discussion is how we can review and respond to these alerts, whether they be security, incidents, threats that are being detected, and also how we can review security and compliance reports. Let's begin with a definition of an incident. It's a collection of correlated alerts and its associated data that details the information about an attack. Now, in those details, we can find information about where the attack began, what tactics were used to perform the attack, how far into our tenant did our attack get to, as well as the scope of the attack, which means how many devices, users, mailboxes were impacted by the attack, as well as all the data associated with the attack. And when we're looking at the incidents that are created by these different alerts, we have additional information that we can view. The attack story, the alerts associated with the incident, the assets associated with the incident, the investigations that are taking place regarding the incident, evidence in response about the incident, so what's being done based on the evidence that we've collected, and then a summary of that incident. When we're looking at the incidents, remember they're made up of alerts. So we'll take a look at some of the XDR alerts. The default Defender Alerts view provides you information about new and in-progress alerts. And this information is displayed to you by default for the last 30 days, but you can filter that out to be shorter or longer. In addition to filtering on the time frame, we can also filter based on severity, status, categories, the service sources, the entities involved, as well as an automated investigation state. Now, when we're looking at these alert sources, you may see some odd characters prepending these alerts, and these can include alerts specific to Microsoft Defender XDR. You may see an RA, TA, or EA for them. Microsoft Defender for Office 365, you'll see FA along with the GUID, the Global Unique Identifier. The Defender for Endpoint, a DA or an ED for custom detection alerts. Defender for Identity, AA along with the GUID. Defender for Cloud Apps, CA along with that GUID. Microsoft Entra ID Protection, AD, App Governance, MA, and Microsoft Data Loss Prevention, D1. So if you see characters prepended to the alert source, this table will help you understand where they came from. Well, let's take a moment and step out and explore these incidents and alerts. And we are on our Microsoft Defender landing page. I will always start the demos there so we know how to navigate to the different areas that we're going to be discussing throughout the course. And in the navigation pane on the left-hand side, we see that we have incidents and alerts. Here are the incidents. Obviously, this tenant isn't active, so we're not going to have any incidents, but you can see some of the columns associated with an incident. And we can filter these incidents if we have several incidents, and these are some of the filtering options that we have. Tags, entities, operating system platform, associated threat, and alert policies. So these are ways we can filter that. Furthermore, over on the right-hand side, you get a week's worth of data. We can go down to a single day, up to 6 months, or provide a custom range. Now, when we go to our alerts, we have similar filtering capabilities, fewer though. These are the ones we talked about already: severity, status, categories, server/detection sources, entities, and automated investigation state. So we can filter. If we have numerous alerts, we can filter these alerts so we don't have to scroll through and view each alert. Let's go back to incidents for a second and go to email notification. And in here, you're going to see that we have incidents and we have threat analytics. So we're going to stay with incidents, and we can add an incident notification rule. I want to be notified if there's any type of incident. Let's say, for instance, we discover malware and we want to create an email notification rule. We'll click next. We'll send only one notification per incident. We'll include the organization name in that email. And if we want direct access, we'll include a tenant-specific portal link. The sources we can define over on the right-hand side. We're going to go under Custom Detection or Defender XDR within the Microsoft Defender XDR. But notice you have Defender for Endpoint, Identity, Cloud Apps. We also have App Governance, AAD Identity Protection, as well as Defender for Office 365. So we have several different sources available to us. We can also decide that we only want to be notified if it's a medium or high severity alert. So we'll specify that. We'll go next. We'll enter the email address. We'll use my email address here. We'll add my email account. I can send a test email if I want to. We'll go ahead and click next. Gives me information about what I've entered in to create this role, and then we'll submit this to be created. And we'll go ahead and click done. And now we have a malware discovered email notification defined. In the last section of this module, I want to talk about threat analytics and reports available to us within Microsoft Defender XDR. So let's begin by taking a look at Microsoft Defender reports. We have the license report, which gives us information about purchased and used licenses within the organization. We also have a security report, which focuses on identities, devices, and apps. Threat protection, we're going to go out and take a peek at that. Alerts and alert trends. Device health and compliance for the trends and health associated with devices within your organization. Vulnerable devices, focusing on those devices and trends. Web protection for monitoring and seeking out phishing sites, malware vectors, and sites that have been explicitly blocked. Firewall for blocking inbound, outbound, and app connections. And device control for media usage like your removable storage devices. So we'll peek at those Defender reports. However, we also have some threat analytics reports. Within here, we have the active threat actors and their campaigns. We have popular and new attack technique, something you should be proactive about. Critical vulnerabilities. We also have common attack services. What are primary targets that the attackers are focusing on? And we have threat analytic reports for preventing malware. Let's step out to our Security Admin Center and explore security reports and threat analytics. So we are back in the Security Admin Center and we are on the home page. And on the left-hand side, we have threat intelligence. If we expand that, we have our threat analytics. Once we open up that page, you're going to see we have kind of a summary across the top. We have ransomware, extortion, phishing, hands-on keyboard, activity group, vulnerability, and attack campaigns, as well as tool or technique. So this provides me a quick overview of the types of events or attacks that are taking place right now. We also have latest threats, high-impact threats, as well as highest exposure threats. If I go into the latest threats and we'll click on QR code phishing, we'll get a report about December 19th, 2023. This is information about a QR code phishing campaign that's been observed by the Microsoft Threat Intelligence researchers. If I go to the right-hand side here and scroll down, you'll see we have 0 active incidents. Alerts over time, we have none of those. Action status is 73.68%. 0 impacted assets. And if you go to the very bottom, we have the breakdown points by category, and it's looking at identity in apps. And on the right-hand side, we have endpoints exposure, and there are no trackable vulnerabilities for our endpoints. Now, if I scroll up to the top here, notice we have some different tabs across the top. We have the analyst report, and here again, we have the executive summary. It then provides a technique overview. How are they pulling this off? And then if you scroll down, it gives you some screenshots and some options to mitigate it to reduce the impact of this threat. We also have a tab for related incidents. We have a tab for impacted assets. And as you've seen, some of this was available on the overview page. We have the endpoints exposure, and there's not much happening there because we don't have any endpoints in this particular situation. And we have one more called recommended actions, and this gives you some suggestions for combating this phishing attack and also how it will impact your secure score. Scroll down, click on reports, and you'll see we have 5 categories of reports. And we have general. This is where we find the security report we talked about earlier on, which gives us information about security trends and how to track the protection status. We have our endpoints. We have threat protection, device health. Some of these we already talked about. Vulnerable devices, a monthly security summary, the web protection that we introduced, firewall, device control, and attack surface reduction rules. We have a category for email and collaboration. We'll expand on that in the next module, but here you can see that we have some reports for that. We have a category for cloud apps, and we have a category for identities. So this is the location you'd come in and access these types of reports from within the Security Admin Center. So in this module, we went through 5 primary topics. We provided an introduction to Microsoft Defender XDR. We introduced and explored the use of the Secure Score. We also talked about reviewing and responding to security incidents and alerts. We then talked about reviewing and responding to security and compliance report issues. And we wrapped it up by discussing the options for reviewing and responding to threats detected in threat analytics. Up next, we're going to be discussing the implementation and management of email and collaboration protection. As we continue our discussion in our course Managing Security using Microsoft Defender XDR, our next topic is the implementation and management of email and collaboration protection. So in this module, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on 4 primary topics. The implementation of policies and rules available in Defender for Office 365, managing threats using Defender, creating and running attack simulations to kind of get an idea of what would happen under specific situations or scenarios when an attack occurs, and we're going to look at unblocking users who may get blocked for security reasons. So let's begin by exploring the different options that we have for Defender solutions of our mail and collaboration. And one of the first options is the Exchange Online Protection, or EOP. This is enabled in all of your Microsoft 365 Exchange Online services. So any subscription that has Exchange Online has this EOP automatically available to them. It is applied to all recipients, and this cannot be turned off. It can, however, be overridden with custom policies. And what this does by default, it prevents broad, volume-based, known attacks. This includes anti-spam, anti-malware, and anti-phishing. Our next step up or level up is the Defender for Office 365 Plan 1. This contains all the features and functionalities in EOP, and this also protects email and collaboration, so your SharePoint content as an example. And it includes features for protecting you against zero-day malware, phishing, and business email compromise. In our third level, highest level, or the most detailed level, is the Defender for Office 365 Plan 2. This includes all the information and features and functionality in Plan 1, and it adds post-breach features that we can use after an attack has occurred. And this plan is beneficial because it includes investigation and automated responses to some of our attacks. So if we look at Defender for Office 365, what does it provide us? It provides us anti-phishing policies, which allows us to define the behavior for checking email to prevent sensitive information from being stolen. It also provides safe attachment policies, which checks email attachments before the recipient receives that email, and we have a safe links policy available to us. This checks email links before the recipient receives the email. So we're checking the inbound content before the users actually receive it. There are a few different policies that we can use for implementing Defender for Office 365. The anti-phishing policy has 4 flavors actually. We have what's called spear phishing, and if you've ever gone phishing, that means these are focusing on individuals instead of the entire organization. And our next one is whaling, and this mostly targets your executives. We have the BEC. BEC is Business Email Compromise, and this is where people are tricked into approving payments or sharing sensitive data. And of course, we have good old ransomware, which encrypts your data and demands payment to decrypt that data so you can use it. So be aware of these different policy types that we can work with. A safe attachments policy uses a virtual environment to check attachments before they're delivered. Your safe links policy performs URL scanning and rewriting of inbound email messages to ensure that any URLs contained within a message coming in are not hazardous to our company. Now I want to take a look at some of the considerations associated with these policies. There are default policies available, and anti-phishing has its own default policy. The built-in protection in preset security policy, which is one that's provided to you by default, contains policies for your safe attachments and your safe links. All of these policies are enabled by default for everyone in your organization. However, you can apply policies at a granular level, and we can filter recipients by users, groups, or domains. So we can go in there and get a lot more granular and filter out these policies and provides more stricter policies for users, groups, or domains. Let's take a moment and step out and explore these policies that are available to us in Defender for Office 365. As always, we begin on the landing page of our Microsoft Defender portal. We're going to scroll down a little bit, and you're going to see we have email and collaboration. Now, if I expand that, and in here we're going to scroll down to policies and rules, and here we have our threat policies, our alert policies, and we have activity alerts. So we're next going to go to threat policies, because that's what we're dealing with these attachments and links. And in here, we're going to focus on the anti-phishing option here. Here's an anti-phishing policy. And in here, we can come in, and you'll see we have two available to us out of the box. Defender for Office 365 Evaluation, on, and the Office 365 Anti-Phish Default Policy, always on. Notice the priority is low, but these are the options that we have available to us out of the box. We can come in and create a new anti-phishing policy. Notice on the left-hand side, we provide a name, users and groups and domains it's applied to, your phishing threshold and protection, the actions you want taken, and then a review page of that policy. So I'll cancel that, and we'll go back to our policies and rules, and we'll go back to our threat policies again, and notice the very first one that we have available to us is the preset security policies, which we can use to be more granular. So we'll click on that. Then when we come in here, we have built-in protection and standard protection, two different options. And one thing I want to draw your attention to is the note on the bottom left-hand side, and that is that the built-in protection is enabled only for paid Microsoft Defender for Office 365 tenants. We are using a trial tenant, so we will not have everything available to us in here. However, I want to go over to the Manage Protection settings and click on this. Here's where we can apply Exchange Online protection. Coming in here, because it's a trial tenant, it's applied to no one. We're going to set it up to apply to all recipients. We could come in and exclude some of these recipients. We'll go next. Apply Defender for Office 365 protection. Again, off by default. We'll go to all recipients, and there's no one that we want to exclude at this point. We'll go next. If we want to set up impersonation, we can also do that here. So we're going to go through, and the next step is to add email addresses to flag when impersonated by attackers. So we can specify maybe our CEO, CIO, EIEIO as someone who might be impersonated by a bad person. And we'll click on next. We can also, instead of going to the individual level, we can go to the domain level. And we'll skip past this and click next. After we've created our policy, we can turn on a policy when it's finished, or we can leave it turned off. So this is nice. I can go in and define the policy without actually enabling and deploying that policy. We'll click next and get our review page, make sure everything looks, smells, and tastes good. And if everything looks good, we click confirm and create our policy. So these are the steps necessary to create a standard protection policy. As you've seen, there's several tasks and options available with the Defender for Office 365. So Microsoft has provided some suggested requirements and tasks for being successful when working with Microsoft Defender for Office 365 within your organization. And they've been broken down into three categories: daily tasks, which is where you'll monitor the Microsoft Defender XDR incidents queue. You'll also look at managing your false positive and false negative detections. So something that was reported as, we'll say, spam that really wasn't, or something that wasn't reported as spam that should have been reported. And also daily, we'll want to review phishing and malware campaigns. Now, going to weekly tasks, we'll want to review reports for email detection trends. Also look at threat analytics to track and respond any emerging threats. And we'll want to review the top targeted malware and phishing users within your organization. Something we can do just periodically at will. We can review and maintain the policies associated with the security operations, as well as perform manual investigation and removal of harmful email. What tools do we have to work with? Well, we've got 4 primary tools that we'll use when we're investigating threats. The first one is Explorer. This is used to analyze threats, monitor the volume of attacks, analyze the data by threat families, and the attacker infrastructure. What infrastructure did they use to attack you? We also have incidents. We can use the incidents list, also referred to as performing investigation, to view all the security incidents that have occurred within the organization. And we can also use automated investigation and response, also referred to as AIR, by configuring this to trigger tasks when an alert occurs. And lastly, we can use attack simulation training, which is used to set up and run realistic cyber attacks to help identify the vulnerabilities within your organization. There are about a half a dozen different attack simulation techniques that we can use. As you can see here, we have the credential harvest, which is a technique used to attempt to collect credentials by routing to a site that's going to require the user to enter their credentials. Malware attachment, it's an attachment that helps compromise the recipient's device. Link-in attachment, which will have an URL within the email using the same technique as the credential harvest we just introduced previously. Link to malware, this is used to run arbitrary code from well-known file sharing services. A drive-by URL, it's a URL to a website that you're familiar with, but that website is silently going to run or install malicious code. And then we have OAuth consent grant. This is a malicious URL that's asking users to grant permissions to data available through an Azure app. So these are the 6 different techniques that are used for simulating attacks. You also have to be able to manage restricted users. And we can identify these restricted users because if a user is receiving email, but they're not able to send any emails, they probably have been blocked because it appears they have sent too many spam messages. We can manage these restricted users using the Microsoft Defender. We're going to see that within the email and collaboration space that we just spent some time in, or using the Exchange Online protection via PowerShell. But we have to have the appropriate permissions to do so. If Exchange Online is being used to manage our restricted users, we have to be in organization management role or in a security administrator role. If we are managing it through Microsoft Entra, we have to be a global admin or a security admin. We also may want to be notified when a restricted user has been identified, so we'll want to enable audit logging to receive notifications when a restricted user has been identified. Let's step back out to our portal and take a look at attack simulation training options, as well as where to unblock restricted users. As always, we are on the landing page of our Microsoft Defender security portal, and I'm going to scroll down to the email and collaboration, expand on that. You'll see the attack simulation training that we just discussed. We'll open that up and you'll see several tabs across the top. On the overview landing page, you'll see we can create a simulation or explore a payload library, and there's a video on the right hand side talking about that, providing us some training. Recent simulations, some good reading for you regarding launching a phishing simulation, running multiple simulations using simulation automation. And we also have a couple cards that cover simulation coverage as well as training completion, repeat offenders, and behavior impact. So that's on my overview page. If we go to simulations, we're going to find information about simulations. Obviously, we don't have any here, but this is where we could launch a simulation if we already had one in place. We have training available for our users. We can run training campaigns to make sure our users are trained on security, compliance, privacy, even the social engineering risk that we just introduced. Some of these we saw on the overview page, but simulation coverage as well as training completion, repeat offenders, behavior impact on compromise rate. And we have automations. We talked about the use of these. We have simulation automations and payload automations. We can come in here to create new automations for use within our organization. Content library. We have 3 tabs here: global payloads, tenant payloads, and MDO recommendations, which is the Microsoft Defender for Office 365. That's what the MDO is. But notice we have some built in already, about 50 of them. And you can see in the right-hand column the technique associated with the payload name. We have an email quarantined notification, keep Office 365 password, confirm account for deposit, payment detail, expense report sharing. So a plethora of options within here. If we go to the tenant payloads, these are ones that we create and identify ourselves. We can create a payload ourselves and store it here. And then we have the MDO recommendations, and we have none at this point because we haven't been using it. And then if we go to settings, the very last option, you get 2 tries as a repeat offender by default. We can increase or decrease that. And you have 90 days by default to complete the training that's been assigned to you, and we can increase or decrease that. So these are some of the configuration settings that we have in here. Now, what if we have a blocked user because they sent a couple spam messages? We go to review on the left-hand side. In review, we have Action Center, quarantine, malware trends. We're focusing on restricted entities. Notice it says unblock entities, which have been blocked for sending too many messages marked as spam or bulk. So this is where we'd find our blocked users. And in here, it would list our users out, and we would be able to get information about them and unblock them from within this interface here. So this is how we would manage our attack simulation training as well as our blocked users. So in this module, we went through 4 primary topics. We talked about implementing policies and rules in Defender for Office 365, which we now see as MDO. We looked at managing threats using Defender and the different tools we have available to us to do so. We talked about creating and running attack simulations and where to follow up on those attack simulations. And we looked at where we can unblock users who have been blocked because they have sent one too many spam messages. Next up, we are going to look at implementing and managing endpoint protection in Microsoft 365. In our next module on the Managing Security Using Microsoft Defender XDR course, we are going to discuss and explore implementing and managing endpoint protection. This is going to involve introducing and exploring onboarding devices to Defender for Endpoint, configuring Defender for Endpoint, reviewing and responding to endpoint vulnerabilities, as well as exploring the Defender Vulnerability Management Dashboard. I want to begin by making sure everyone understands what is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. As we see here, it's an enterprise endpoint security platform that's used to help enterprise networks prevent, detect, investigate, and respond to advanced security threats. And in order for us to deploy endpoint, we need to understand what the endpoint requirements are. Of course, it's going to require the appropriate security license, and there's several options to choose from here. Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 or 2, Microsoft Defender for Business includes it, Windows 10 or 11 Enterprise, either E5 or A5 subscription, M365 E5, A5 or G5 subscription, M365 E5, A5, G5 security subscription, or M365 F5 security and compliance. So tons of options for making sure you have access to Defender for Endpoint. What about operating systems? Well, we need Windows 10 or higher, Windows 7 or 8.1 with MMA, Microsoft Monitoring Agent, or Windows Server 2012 R2 or higher. So these are the requirements as far as operating systems. We'll also need Microsoft Edge or a Google Chrome browser. After ensuring we meet the requirements, we are now going to look at how we can onboard Defender for Endpoint. We have about a half a dozen different ways to do this. We can use local scripts, we can use group policies, Microsoft Configuration Manager, Microsoft Intune, we're going to spend some time in that here, VDI scripts, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure scripts, as well as Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So all these are ways for us to onboard tools for Windows 10 or 11, Windows Server 2016 or higher, or that unique flavor of Windows Server 1803. And there are two parts to onboarding Defender for Endpoint. We have client onboarding. With client onboarding, we can onboard to Windows 10 or 11, Windows 365, Server 2012 R2, 16, 19, 22, or our 1803. And to do so, we can onboard using one of the previous methods that we discussed on the previous slide. If we have Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1, we can onboard by installing the Microsoft Monitoring Agent, or MMA again, or Microsoft Defender for Cloud. If we're way down to Windows 7 Service Pack 1 or Windows 8.1, the only way we can onboard Defender for Endpoint as the client is using the Microsoft Monitoring Agent. What about server side? Defender for Endpoint Windows Server onboarding requires Windows Server 2012 R2 and 2016. If we have either of those flavors, we can download the installation package, we can use an onboarding package, or we can use one of those previous methods we discussed a couple slides ago. If you're running Windows Server 1803 or 2019 or 2022, we can use the onboarding package as well, or we can use one of those tools that we discussed a couple slides ago. How about non-Windows devices like Macs or Androids? We can use Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, or we can use any type of third-party solution that will allow us to deploy software to that non-Windows device. What about if I decide I want to offboard or remove it? Well, it depends on the operating system. Windows Server 2012 R2, 16, or 19, as well as Windows 10 or 11, you can use a group policy to offboard, Configuration Manager, mobile device management tools, or a local. Script. If you're running other Windows Server versions not listed in this first group here, you can uninstall the MMA agent, or you can remove the Defender for Endpoint workspace configuration. Again, what about our non-Windows devices? How do we offboard there? We can simply use Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, or we can use a third-party solution. So the same options we had for onboarding. Now, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint integrates with Intune, but there are some general steps we need to follow to do so. We need to establish service-to-service connection between Defender for Endpoint and Intune, and we can then use an Intune policy to onboard devices with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. We can use Intune compliance policies to specify the allowable risk level. We can also use conditional access policies for blocking users from our corporate resources from non-compliant devices. Or we can use app protection policies for Android and iOS configuration to assign the risk levels for these non-Windows devices. In the event that we have devices that cannot enroll in Intune, we have some options for them. The supported platforms for this are Windows 10 and Windows 11, Windows Server 2012 R2 and higher, Linux, Mac OS. If we want to use Defender for Endpoint and they're not able to enroll in Intune, the devices must have access to asterisk.dm.microsoft.com endpoint. And they also require a license or a subscription that contains licenses for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Being these devices were not enrolled using Intune, they are using the Defender for Endpoint security settings management for device management. Well, I'd like to take a few minutes and step out and explore the options available to us in the Microsoft Intune Admin Center. Notice we are in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. We're not in the Security Admin Center. And I'm going to go into Endpoint Manager instead of the Security Admin Center. And when that opens up, we are in the Microsoft Intune Admin Center, and we have some options along the left panel there. This is the home page, and you can see it provides status information, devices not in compliance, configuration policies with error or conflict, client app install failure, connector errors, and it shows that our service health is healthy and our account status is active. If we go down to the dashboard, we get some additional information. We have device enrollment, device compliance, configuration, client app, so some additional information, and you can click on any of these cards to drill down and get some details. Let's go down to Endpoint Security, and as you can see, we're on the Overview page. If you go into the middle of the page on the right-hand side here, you can see we have Microsoft recommended security settings. Those are the security baselines. In the center column, we have simplified security policies, the basic ones, the antivirus, disk encryption, firewall, attack surface reduction, endpoint detection and response, as well as account protection. In the rightmost column has View Security Tasks, as well as Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So if I click on the security baselines, you're going to see we have 5 pretty common baselines, and these are just recommended security configuration settings that you can apply to your enrolled devices. And one of the common ones here is the security baseline for Windows 10 and later. If we go down to, let's say, antivirus, this is where we can come in and create policies now. And you'll see across the top we have a summary, unhealthy endpoints, active malware, and reusable settings. Down here we have create a policy, so let's go ahead and click on that. We'll select our platform. We'll stay with Windows 10, 11, and Windows Server. We'll select our profile. Let's do Microsoft Defender Antivirus. And we'll go ahead and click create. And now it's going to ask for a name for this, so antivirus profile. And we'll click next. And if we expand on Defender, again, we have a plethora of options in here. And I'm going to scroll slowly so you can take a peek at some of them. We'll come back and work with Allow Email Scanning. It's mostly about scanning and where you want it to scan. Allow real-time monitoring, script scanning, cloud block level, disable catch-up full scan, enable low CPU priority, excluded extensions, excluded paths, excluded processes, so we can also exclude areas. Schedule scan time, signature update, signature information, and randomized schedule task time. So these are some of the options we had in here. I'm going to grab an easy one here. We're going to set it to allowed, turns on email scanning. We'll click next. Scopes are what devices, for instance, that we want to apply it to, so we're going to just use the default scope. We'll go next here. We can add groups, add all users, or add all devices. And we can come down here and exclude groups. Let's click on add group. And we just had the one group, so we'll click on that. We'll select it, and then we'll go ahead and click next. Here's our summary page of what we've decided. Name is antivirus profile, description, no description, platform, Windows 10 and later, We're going to work within the Defender. We're going to apply this profile to our SPO resources group, and we haven't excluded any groups. And we can go ahead and click Create. And now you'll see that we have a new profile. And this is how we can use Intune with endpoint security for controlling security on our devices. Now I want to spend some time drilling into the capabilities of Defender for Endpoint. And as you can see, we have about a half a dozen here. And we'll begin with the first one, Endpoint Detection and Response, or EDR. This provides advanced attack detections, which are pretty much real-time and they're actionable, which means we can take actions. And we're going to see the type of actions that we can take with them in just a couple slides. And our second one is Configure Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. This provides you real-time endpoint detection, giving you device vulnerability context during your investigations. Configure Next Generation Protection, or NGP. This is your built-in anti-malware solution that provides you next generation protection on your endpoints. Configure Attack Surface Reduction, protecting your devices and apps from new and emerging threats, those new ones on the horizon. And we also have Configure Auto Investigation and Remediation, or AIR capabilities. We use these for automated investigations to help reduce the manual effort on the alerts that we're investigating. And lastly, Configure Microsoft Defender Experts capabilities. This provides you expert level monitoring and analysis to ensure those critical threats are not overlooked and are taken seriously. And we can manage Defender for Endpoint using conditional access. And this is a 5-step process. We're going to begin by enabling the Microsoft Intune connection, which is available within Microsoft Defender XDR. We're then going to enable Defender for Endpoint from inside of Intune. We're then going to create compliance policies within Intune. We'll assign these policies, and lastly, we'll create a Microsoft Entra conditional access policy for our endpoints. We also need to be aware of endpoint detection and response. This provides you advanced attack detections, near real-time and actionable, as we talked about in the previous slide. We can prioritize alerts. We can gain granular information about the breach, and we can take actions to remediate threats. Once the threats are detected, the alerts are created in the system. A security analyst can investigate the threat, and we can also look for similar attack techniques, or if it's the same attacker, and use them as a group to create an incident. I mentioned the word actionable, in that we can take some actions based on the alerts, and some of these actions are managing tags, initiate an automated investigation, initiate a live response session. You can collect an investigation package. You can run an antivirus scan. You can isolate a device so we can prevent the device from being used until we remove the threat. And if the threat is app related, we can restrict app execution. And lastly, we can consult with a threat expert to see what they suggest we do when we're responding to a device attack. We have a tool called Microsoft Defender for Business. In here, you can monitor incidents and alerts. You can click on an alert for more details, and when you do so, one of the details will include the severity. The Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Dashboard is also another tool that we can use to provide us continuous discovery and monitoring of alerts. We also have risk-based intelligent prioritization within that dashboard, and we can use it for remediation and tracking of threats. And we can also use this to view any threats that have been detected. Let's drill into some of the vulnerability management features. And within vulnerability management, we have a dashboard which provides information about the vulnerabilities, their exposure, as well as some recommendations, including links to give you more detail on your recommended action. Recommendations are a list of current security recommendations, as well as related threat information to consider. Remediation lists remediation actions as well as their status. Actions may include blocking your threats, running antivirus software, or updating a device. Inventories lists your software and apps currently being used, including browsers, your operating systems, and any other software, along with the weaknesses of those apps, as well as any potential threats with those apps. Weaknesses. It lists your vulnerabilities and the number of exposed devices in the organization. If you see a 0, that means there's no action necessary. And the event timeline lists events affecting your organization in a timeline view. Now, I mentioned severity levels. Let's drill into these threat detected severity levels. And we'll begin by looking at the scenario on the left, then we'll talk about the alert severity and the reason for that. So if we have an automated attack disruption, It's detected as an advanced attack. This is considered high. Attack disruption capabilities are used to contain the attack, giving your IT and your security team time to address the attack and mitigate it. Microsoft Defender Antivirus is another scenario. This is more informational. The threat was stopped before any damage had occurred, but you need to be aware of it. Microsoft Defender Antivirus detects malware within the company. Well, being it's within the company, it's low, but some damage may have been done to an individual device, but the malware is no longer a threat to the organization. Malware currently executing and detected by Defender for Business. This could be medium or high depending on what the threat is. If the malware poses a threat to your individual devices or to your entire company, we can take an action of blocking the malware immediately. Suspicious behavior detected, but no remediation action taken yet. Low, medium, or high, this is going to depend on the degree of the threat posed to your company. Alright, at this point I want to step back out to our portal and peruse through the options available within Vulnerability Management. You're going to see here, I'm back on the home page of Microsoft Defender. We're going to go down to the Endpoints area on the left-hand side. And inside of here, you'll see we have 4 options. We're going to expand on Vulnerability Management, and you'll see the items that we introduced on the table previously. Beginning with the dashboard, you'll see we have an exposure score. We're at 0 because we have no devices registered. But we can work within here. We have top security recommendations, and it gives you information about exposed devices, threats, the impact, and those tags that we introduced. We can also show exceptions there. We can see information regarding the last 7 days on the events that occurred and what devices were impacted by those events. We also have device exposure distribution as well as top remediation activities. Top vulnerable software, the operating system platform, the weaknesses, the threats, as well as the exposed devices. Top exposed devices, security recommendations, as well as discovered vulnerabilities and exposure level. And lastly on this dashboard, we have expiring server certificates as well as your secure score that we talked about earlier in this course. Now if I go to the left-hand side and click on recommendations, remember this is the list of your current security recommendations and any related threat information that you want to take into consideration. And in remediation, we would have a list of remediation activities in progress or past due. We also have inventories. Here's where we would find our inventories. Notice we have software, browser extensions, certificates, as well as hardware and firmware. We also have weaknesses down here, listing vulnerabilities and the number of exposed devices associated with that vulnerability. We have our event timeline, and we have baseline assessment, which has a tab for overview, as well as profiles, and some configuration settings. So this is how we access and the options that we have available to us within Vulnerability Management. So in this module, we focused on 4 concepts. We talked about onboarding devices to Defender for Endpoint. We also discussed configuring Defender for Endpoint. We looked at reviewing and responding to endpoint vulnerabilities, and we wrapped it up by exploring the Defender Vulnerability Management Dashboard. And up next, we're going to go through the highlights and the key concepts I want you to be familiar with in our course review. I like to end every course by reiterating the key concepts that we discussed throughout the course. These are the concepts that I want you to pay particular attention to when you're leaving the course. This course contained 3 primary topics: managing security reports and threats using Microsoft Defender Portal, implementing and managing email and collaboration protection, and implementing and managing endpoint protection. And I want to begin by reminding you that we talked about Microsoft Defender XDR, and these are the requirements for XDR. It requires the appropriate security license, and also requires the appropriate permissions to enable XDR. That means you have to be a global administrator or a security administrator. After enabling, you have to have the appropriate permissions for managing XDR. Again, global administrator, security administrator, but also a security operator can be involved, a global reader for viewing information, as well as a security reader for viewing information. And you're going to be accessing this using a browser. So any HTML5 compliant browser or Edge or IE11 can be used for managing Defender XDR. One of the key concepts in security is the Secure Score. The Secure Score is divided into 4 categories: identity, app, device, and data. And remember, the Secure Score helps by reporting on the organization's security posture, It improves security posture by providing data, and we can compare with benchmarks and establish KPIs, your key performance indicators. You receive points for several different actions, and probably the key one is configuring recommended security features, performing security-related tasks, and mitigating recommended actions. Security is driven by alerts, and when an alert is generated because of a security issue, we're going to have information like where the attack began, what tactics were used to attack your organization, how far the attack got into your tenant, the scope of the attack, the scope meaning how many devices, users, mailboxes were impacted by the attack, as well as all of the data associated with that attack. Remember, the alert can come from several different sources, so be sure to refresh your memory on these different alert sources and the associated prepended characters. We also introduced and discussed threat analytics reports. These included their active threat actors and their campaigns, popular and new attack techniques, critical vulnerabilities, common attack services, who and how are they being attacked, as well as prevalent malware. And one of the key tools we have for managing these attacks are the Defender for Office 365 policies. We have anti-phishing policies. We have 4 different types of anti-phishing policies, and I want you to be familiar with the 4 different types of anti-phishing policies and who they affect. Also be familiar with the Safe Attachments policy as well as the Safe Links policy. Also, in regards to Defender for Office 365, there are some policy considerations. There are default policies that are available. Anti-phishing has its own default policy. There are built-in protection in the preset security policies for your safe attachments and your safe links. All of these policies are enabled by default for everyone in your organization. You can, however, create your own policies and apply these policies at a more granular level for filtering the recipients of the policy. And we can filter by users, we can filter by groups, and we can filter by domains. And to help us get familiar and combat these attacks, we have some attack simulation techniques available to us. And I want you to take some time to familiarize yourself with these attack techniques. So if you are presented with a situation, you'll know which one of these techniques is being used. We also introduced and discussed the idea of managing our restricted users. We manage our restricted users using the Microsoft Defender portal or using Exchange Online Protection, and we do that via PowerShell. In order for us to manage restricted users, there are some permissions we need to have, and within Exchange Online, you have to be in the organization management role or have a security administrator role. Or instead of Exchange Online, you can use Microsoft Entra permissions, and you'll have to be a global admin or a security admin for managing restricted users. And I highly suggest you enable audit logging to receive notifications of restricted users. We also drilled into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, and I want to review the requirements for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. It requires the appropriate security license. Well, we have several to choose from. Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 or 2, Microsoft Defender for Business, Windows 10 or 11, Enterprise E5 or A5, M365 E5 A5 or G5, M365 E5 A5 G5 Security, as well as Microsoft 365 F5 Security and Compliance. Several operating systems are supported, Windows 10 or higher, Windows 7 or 8.1 with MMA, as well as Windows Server 2012 R2 or higher. You'll need to manage and access this using Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome browsers. The process of providing access to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is accomplished by using onboarding tools, and we have several different tools we can choose from: local scripts, group policy, Microsoft Configuration Manager, Microsoft Intune, VDI Scripts, which is your virtual desktop infrastructure, or Microsoft Defender for Cloud. You also have Security Settings Management, which can be used for individuals who have devices which can't be registered or enrolled with Intune. And the Security Settings Management supports the following platforms: Windows 10 and Windows 11, Windows Server 2012 R2 and higher, Linux, or a Mac OS. And remember, all of these devices must have access to this endpoint. They also do require a subscription or a license that contains licensing for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And as you can see here, there are about a half a dozen Defender for Endpoint capabilities. Be sure to understand the difference between these different Defender for Endpoint capabilities. We also introduced and discussed Microsoft Defender for Business. This is used for monitoring incidents and alerts. You can click on the alerts discovered in here for additional details, and within those details you'll see the alert severity. We also have a dashboard that we can use. This provides continuous discovery and monitoring. It uses risk-based intelligent prioritization, and we can use it for remediation and tracking, as well as using this to view detected threats. And these are the different threat detected severity levels. Again, be familiar with this table here and understand the different scenarios and the alert severity and the reason for that severity. So in our final module, we reviewed the key components that we discussed throughout the course. And that's a wrap for this course, Managing Security Using Microsoft Defender XDR. Again, my name is Brian Alderman. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you in another course here soon at Pluralsight.